Have you ever stopped in the middle of a good moment, maybe laughter, maybe love, maybe success, and suddenly asked yourself, why doesn't this feel like happiness? Like something is missing. Like you've touched the surface, but never really arrived. We've all been there. The holiday comes. The job is landed. The person says yes. And still, some quiet echo inside says, is this it? The world promised you more. All your life, you were taught to believe in a kind of happiness, shiny, loud, permanent. You were told it would come after achievement. After approval. After the struggle. You were told to wait. And so you waited. And you worked. And you chased. But what if the promise was never real? What if happiness, as we imagine it, doesn't exist? This is not a cynical question. This is a necessary one. Because maybe we've been looking for something that was never there, or looking in places that could never give it. Maybe happiness was never meant to be a destination. Maybe it was a signal, a brief flicker to tell you that, just for a moment, your inner world aligned with the outer one. But like any signal, it passes. And if you cling to it, you begin to suffer. The Stoics warned us about this long ago. Seneca wrote that the greatest obstacle to happiness is expecting too much of it. We don't suffer because life is painful, we suffer because we expected it to be painless. We don't despair because joy is rare, we despair because we thought it would be constant. And so we think something is wrong with us. But maybe nothing is wrong. Maybe what's broken is our idea of happiness. You see, we've confused happiness with stimulation. We've confused it with comfort, pleasure, ease. But real happiness, if it exists at all, doesn't always feel good. It feels right. And there's a difference. Right is deeper. It's the stillness after doing what's hard but necessary. It's the quiet that follows an honest conversation. It's the inner calm of walking away from something that no longer fits, even when it hurts. But we don't chase that kind of happiness. We chase the chemical kind. The dopamine kind. The kind that lights up and then disappears. And so we live in cycles of longing and reward. We scroll. We spend. We seduce. We succeed. But each time we arrive, the high fades. And we find ourselves starting over, a little more exhausted than before. And then we ask, is this all life is? Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, sat with that same question. With the weight of the world on his shoulders, with the power to command armies, he wrote in the privacy of his journal, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. What did he mean? He meant this: happiness is not out there. It's not a condition of your circumstances. It's not a reward waiting at the end of the road. It's a byproduct of how you walk the road. But walking that road demands something of you. It demands awareness, discipline, courage. It demands the refusal to hand over your peace to things beyond your control. Because as long as your happiness depends on something external, it will always be hostage to chance. You will be happy when people treat you well, and devastated when they don't. You will be happy when plans succeed, and destroyed when they fall apart. You will be happy when life gives, and broken when it takes. But if your happiness is rooted in how you meet life, not in what life gives you, then you're free. This is the Stoic path. And it's not a path of detachment. It's a path of clarity. To want less. To love more purely. To suffer without collapsing. To lose without becoming bitter. To live without clinging. And in that space, maybe happiness is not the high we were promised, but the warmth that returns when we stop trying to be somewhere else. When we finally land inside our own life. Look around you. The world is obsessed with happiness. It sells you books, pills, retreats, philosophies, all promising that elusive feeling. It tells you that if you just fix this one thing, your body, your partner, your job, your trauma, then you'll finally feel it. That click. That peace. But what if the chase itself is the reason you feel empty? Most people don't want happiness. They want escape. They want relief. From pressure, from loneliness, from fear. They want to feel different, and they call that happiness. But the moment the feeling fades, they start running again. And they wonder why it never lasts. Here's the truth we don't say out loud: happiness is fragile when it depends on emotion. It comes and goes like weather. One text, one delay, one piece of bad news, and it's gone. Then you're back to chasing, back to comparing, back to thinking, why am I still not okay? But what if the goal was never to feel good all the time? The Stoics believe that happiness isn't something you pursue. It's something that arises as a side effect of virtue, of living with reason, courage, and clarity. You don't chase it. You align yourself with what is true, and happiness follows, if it wants to. And if it doesn't, you're still okay. That's the shift. That's the freedom. You stop asking the world to make you feel better. You start asking yourself to become better, steadier, stronger, more whole. But that's not what we've been taught. We've been taught to accumulate, love, praise, wealth, comfort, certainty. And every time we get one thing, we move the line again. We tell ourselves we'll be happy after the next raise, after the next trip, after the next version of ourselves. But there is no after. There's just the now, and your relationship to it. You think you want more. But more isn't the answer. What you want is meaning. You want to look at your life and know that it's yours. Not borrowed from culture. Not shaped by fear. Yours. And that's what the Stoics offered, not a formula for pleasure, but a compass for meaning. A way of being in the world that isn't reactive, but rooted. Rooted in values. In perspective. In the discipline to say, I don't control what happens, but I control what I become. Can you say that today? Because that's the real question. Not, are you happy? But, are you becoming someone you trust? Are you showing up in your life with honesty? With consistency? With the willingness to face discomfort without fleeing from it? That's the ground where happiness begins. Not comfort. Integrity. And the irony is, the moment you stop demanding happiness, it starts to appear. Not in big fireworks. But in the quiet. In the breath you take when you're no longer pretending. In the ease of doing what's right, even when it's hard. In the steadiness of knowing you are enough, not because you're perfect, but because you're present. Because you've stopped abandoning yourself. Think about the moments that truly stayed with you. Not the ones you posted. The real ones. Were they always joyful? Probably not. But they were true. And something in you recognized that. Maybe happiness is not a feeling. Maybe it's a recognition. A sense of, I'm where I'm meant to be, doing what aligns with who I really am. Even if it's hard. Even if it's quiet. Even if no one sees it. Because the truth is, happiness is not the point. Wholeness is. And wholeness means being able to feel it all. To hold both joy and grief. To live without needing the world to be anything other than what it is. That's where real peace begins. Not in controlling life, but in meeting it fully, without flinching. Let's be honest, life is not a gentle thing. It breaks you. It humbles you. It asks you to let go of people you love, dreams you once believed in, and parts of yourself you thought were permanent. It throws you into the unknown with no map, no promise, no guarantee that any of it will make sense. And yet, somehow, there are still moments of beauty. A hand reaching for yours when you needed it most. A conversation that pulled you out of darkness. A quiet walk after a storm. Not happiness in the grand sense, but something real. Something that made the pain bearable, if only for a moment. So what is that? It's not pleasure. It's not excitement. It's not even peace, exactly. It's presence. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, not happiness in the modern sense, but human flourishing. Living in alignment with nature, with virtue, with your highest self. A life that makes suffering worth enduring because it's rooted in something deeper than comfort. Most people avoid suffering at all costs. But the Stoic doesn't. Not because they enjoy pain, but because they understand it's part of life's contract. You don't get to choose a life without hardship. You only get to choose what it does to you. You either let it make you bitter, or better. You either resist it and break, or you let it shape you and rise. You don't get to decide what happens. But you get to decide what it means. And that's where real strength begins. Not in avoidance. In interpretation. Seneca once wrote, "A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." He didn't mean we should stop dreaming or growing. He meant that wishing for things to be otherwise, when they are not, only multiplies our pain. But when you say, "This is mine to carry, and I will carry it well," something shifts. You stop feeling like a victim. You become the one who chooses their response. That's power. And in that space, even in grief, even in loss, something like happiness appears. Not the kind that makes you laugh, but the kind that makes you proud. Quiet pride. A sacred steadiness. Because you've walked through fire, and you did not run. You stood your ground, not because it was easy, but because it was yours. There is happiness in that. A fierce kind. A rooted kind. A kind that doesn't depend on mood or timing or the approval of others. It is born in you, when you realize you are capable of facing life as it is, and still remaining whole. That's what we forget in our pursuit of constant pleasure, that much of what makes life worth living is not the absence of pain, but our ability to endure it with dignity. No one talks about that. No one tells you that happiness might live side by side with sorrow. That you can be grieving, and still grateful. That you can be afraid, and still faithful. That you can be alone, and still complete. We think these are opposites. But they're not. They are partners. They are the rhythm of being human. And when you stop rejecting one side, the other becomes more vivid. If you try to numb your sadness, you also numb your joy. If you run from uncertainty, you run from wonder. If you demand constant light, you miss the sacred depth of the dark. The Stoics didn't seek to eliminate emotion. They sought to understand it, to meet it with reason, to hold it without being ruled by it. Not to be cold, but clear. Not to suppress, but to choose. That's the work. To be fully alive without being enslaved by what you feel. To suffer, but not be shattered. To celebrate, but not become dependent. To love, and still be willing to let go. This is not detachment. This is discipline. And it is the soil from which true happiness might grow, slow, humble, but real. So if you're still waiting for the day when nothing hurts, stop. That day is not coming. But a better day is, the one where you hurt and keep going. Where you're afraid and stay kind. Where you're uncertain and still show up. Where you stop asking, does happiness exist? And start asking, am I becoming someone who can meet life, all of it, with open eyes and an open heart? Because maybe, that's what happiness really is. Somewhere deep down, you already know the answer. Not the loud, confident one you give when someone asks how you're doing. Not the clever version polished for public consumption. But the quiet one. The one that lives in the stillness after the noise. When the lights are off. When it's just you, your breath, and whatever is left. Does happiness exist? Not the happiness we're sold. Not the permanent high. Not the flawless, smiling version with perfect lighting and 1,000 likes. But something simpler. More honest. Less glamorous. Yes. It exists. But not in the way you thought. It doesn't arrive with celebration. It's not a trophy or a finish line. It's not found in arrival, or even in success. It lives in alignment. In moments when your values and your actions stop contradicting each other. Happiness is not a place. It's a posture. A way of standing inside your own life. It's waking up and knowing you're not running from yourself anymore. It's falling asleep without dread, not because everything is solved, but because you've stopped abandoning what matters. It's no longer needing the world to reflect your worth, because you've seen it, quietly, for yourself. And the beauty is, no one can give this to you. Which means no one can take it away. That's what the Stoics believed. That true happiness, or tranquility, as they often called it, is the result of internal order. When the soul is no longer in conflict with itself. When your desires are tamed, your fears are named, and your choices are consistent with your character. And this isn't theoretical. It's brutally practical. Ask yourself. Do I keep my word? Do I control my tongue? Do I give more than I take? Do I live according to what I know is right, even when no one is watching? These aren't spiritual accessories. They are the foundation. Because a disordered soul cannot feel peace, not for long. And we all know this, don't we? We've all felt that quiet shame when we betray our own standard. When we lie, when we lash out, when we act small while knowing we could have acted better. That's the wound we carry, not just what's been done to us, but what we've allowed ourselves to become. But there's good news. You can choose again. Right now. The Stoics weren't interested in judging you for the past. They were interested in who you could become today. With what you have. With what you know. They believe that virtue is enough. That a good person, living with wisdom and integrity, can face anything, loss, failure, exile, even death, and still remain free. That's not myth. That's not idealism. That's a challenge. One that stands in front of you right now. Because no, you don't need more time. No, you don't need better conditions. You need clarity. Courage. A reason to stop postponing your life. And once you stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect partner, the perfect self, something changes. You begin to live. And maybe you don't feel euphoric all the time. But you feel honest. Clean. Awake. You begin to choose your life instead of enduring it. You begin to speak the truth, not because it's easy, but because you're tired of pretending. You begin to simplify, not out of punishment, but because peace matters more than noise. You begin to say no, not to be cruel, but to protect your soul. And yes, not out of fear, but because you mean it. Little by little, the craving for happiness fades. Not because you give up, but because you outgrow the version you were taught to want. You stop chasing sparks and start tending fire. A deeper fire. The kind that stays lit even in the cold. The kind that burns quietly through grief, through failure, through solitude, and still gives off light. That fire lives in you. It always has. It's what brought you here. To this question. To this moment. And now, you have a choice. You can keep chasing the illusion, the endless highs, the constant approval, the perfect conditions. Or you can begin the real work. The work of building a life that doesn't collapse every time the world disappoints you. The work of standing in storms without bitterness. The work of showing up fully, flawed, uncertain, but committed to truth. The work of becoming someone you respect. Because when you do that, when you live with clarity, when you meet the day with presence and strength, something begins to grow. Not happiness as we imagined it. But something deeper. Stillness. Rootedness. Freedom. A life you're not running from. A self you're not ashamed of. That's the answer. Not a feeling, but a foundation. Not a constant smile, but a steady heart. Not a finish line, but the ability to walk the path with open eyes. Does happiness exist? Yes. But not as a prize. It exists as a consequence. A natural result of a life lived well. And that is something you can begin today. No matter what you've lost. No matter what you've been through. No matter how far you think you've fallen. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are already standing on the path. Now walk it.